Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining in another podcast. And this is going to be very first podcast on security in 2023. I'm your host, Adnan Rafiq. This is one of the questions I've been getting a lot on my social media platform. Hey, how do I get started in the field of cybersecurity? In this particular podcast, we will share what are the skills you can learn, and we'll talk about how cloud security is important when it comes to the businesses. And I have today a very special guest, very known person, because I know him because he got very famous in Microsoft, I believe, Ignite conference in US a couple of years ago. His session was like all over. Everybody was talking about it. And he's very known also in Finland. And with that said, I want Sami. I really appreciate his time. And please start introducing yourself. Thank you, Sami.
Hey everyone, so my name is Sami Laiho. As said, I'm from Finland. I'm currently stationed about 40 kilometers from Helsinki, our capital. I am currently mostly teaching people in cybersecurity and Windows operating system internals and troubleshooting. I travel all around the world, speaking in different conferences, and I've been a Microsoft certified trainer for 23 or 22 years now, had a Microsoft MVP in the core operating system since 2011.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you get into cybersecurity?
Well, to be fair, as I said, I started off by being a Microsoft operating system specialist. I used to work in a big training center, the biggest training center in Finland at that time. And I was kind of a household staff trainer, I'd say. So I was teaching, actually, I just checked it out some time ago. I was teaching 42 different classes. So I was basically teaching anything when it comes to Microsoft. And that's beginning of 2000. Security was a module on one of the courses, but it wasn't that big of a thing back then. So I kind of started off there, and then maybe 2012 or 2013, that was the time when cybersecurity started to be more popular. To be fair, I went to all the cybersecurity sessions, and they were, whether it was Microsoft Tech Ed or any other conference, the cybersecurity hacking, cracking, whatever sessions were always like totally crowded by people. And met Paula Januszkiewicz for the first time back then and really loved her sessions. And I the only problem for me always was that when I went to security sessions, if not talking about everyone's sessions, so let's not generalize, but I went to many of the sessions, and my problem with the sessions was that I hated two things about it. One was that they were all about, I hack you like this, I hack you like this, I crack your system like this, I can hack you this easily, and you this easily, and you all this easily. And it was all about everyone attacking you, and everyone basically just walked from the room, usually their heads down, saying things like, my company sucks. It was all about bashing on everyone how great the hackers were. And I even at that point, I was already a blue teamer in that sense, that I was always defending the environments, and I didn't really appreciate the fact that no one actually told about the mitigations. I was missing that blue team part heavily. And then the other one was that they were always done against improperly configured operating systems. I mean, I get it if you speak about home users who have their full admin rights all the time, but every session back then was about Mimikatz can do this, Mimikatz can do that. And we, on this side, knew that Mimikatz can do this and that if it doesn't have admin rights. So basically, the book from NT 3.1 in 1993 says that there's no security in Windows if you log on as an admin. So basically, every core concept that I had been teaching, they completely missed those. So when you're talking to enterprise customers like TechEd, for example, I thought it was really ridiculous that all the demos were against improperly configured operating systems. So my background kind of gave me the motivation to go on stage and start talking about like, here's how you can hack it. But honestly, if you would have done this by the book, that would not be possible. And that's how I kind of started getting into the industry of cybersecurity. It was more about I knew so much about Windows internals that it just felt bad. I don't think I have drunk too much of the Microsoft Kool-Aid, but I think still it was unfair that everyone says like Windows hack is so easy to hack. It's like, but
Right.
you haven't even configured any of the basic principles.
Exactly. And you mentioned a good point. Knowing the operating system is very important. Some basic stuff. You got to know operating system, network, and storage and all that. Because if you don't do it right, you're already vulnerable. So did you make sure, have you gone through the list? It's not about it. You just mentioned somebody's bombarding, hey, I can do this, I can do that. That's not what cybersecurity is all about. Those who are watching something, you mentioned you have a solid background in Windows. I've seen people myself going to boot camp and all that. They're just learning tools, not basic on Windows, boot camps and all that. So security is not about just learning the tools. It's way more than that. So somebody who's been asking or reached out on my, hey, I'm a newbie. I wanted to get into cybersecurity. What's the recommendation or tips from you? Hey, go do these 3 things or 5 things first. That's going to help them. So any recommendation for them?
There's kind of two ways of looking at it. So one
Yeah.
is exactly what you meant, well, exactly what you said, which is that honestly, you can't secure unless you know what to secure. I mean, you need to understand the platforms. To be fair, if you take, like I teach memory dumps on troubleshooting classes. So if you take a memory dump out of an iPad and you take a memory dump out of a Windows machine, they don't really look that different. They're all running on the same kind of CPUs that both do zeros and ones at a lightning speed, so pace. So they're really not that different. I mean, but you have to understand the core concepts like how virtual memory works compared to physical memory. You have to understand how the file systems work, how permissions work, privileges work, how services work compared to user mode applications. What is the difference between user mode and kernel mode? Things like this. And that I would say that leads you into, I would always recommend everyone that they should not skip their Windows internals. So there are, start off easy, for example, read the sysinternals book from Marcus Sinovich and Aaron Marcosis, the second edition. Read through that. That'll get you like from 0 to 2, and then 2 to 5 you can get with the Windows internals book, which is now on the 7th edition. It's a horribly big thing to read, 2 books times 2 times 700 pages. It's a big one. I know it's a difficult one. I've read it a gazillion times, but it is honestly the Bible for Windows
Mm.
admins. So I'm a Windows guy, but Linux is a Finnish operating system, so and I've actually been in school where it's mandatory to learn Linux.
Oh,
I mean, but the fair thing is that if you learn your Windows internals, you will learn your operating system basics because they're really much the same. So you should
mhm.
know the platform that you're working with, and that's something that I see people missing when we have people that they educate themselves in school for cybersecurity. The first thing I have to tell them is that although now you understand what a security operations center is and what incident response does, and you know your different sorts of frameworks for security, you really have to learn how to understand the patient. So you should really learn your operating systems. That is, even Azure runs on Hyper-V, which runs on Windows. Okay,
Right.
it's not well called the same. It's cloud host, but whatever. I mean, it's still Windows.
Yep.
And that's one thing. And then the other thing is, if you are new to cybersecurity, then I think you should first try to understand the kind of different roles that cybersecurity offers. For example, how does a security operations center work? What is incident response? What does forensics really mean? All this kind of stuff. I always point people at either Pluralsight or LinkedIn Learning.
Yep.
There's like any budget because they have a very good like fundamentals of cybersecurity course, both of them. And that will more like teach you about how this industry works. And
Okay.
then you can kind of choose your journey on where you want to concentrate. I was working for a gigantic SOC for 6 months, and 80% of the customers are using the Microsoft stack.
Okay.
Rest of them are using Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black. So I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a Windows guy. Currently, most of my customers run on the Microsoft stack. For those, then you have your own certification examinations and prep
Right.
tests and everything, and that's kind of more provided by Microsoft. I always believe that there is nothing better than learning from someone actually on a live session, whether it's
Mm.
online or whether it's on site somewhere. So I, of course, but well, I'm a classroom teacher, so that's kind of makes sense for me that it's easier to learn this way. I finished today. I did a 7 hour live session for an app locker course.
Mm.
So, I mean, I still think the live training is very worthy, but then we have so good resources on the video on demand side. So then I would say that LinkedIn Learning and Pluralsight are the biggest and best ones when it comes to paid services. Of course, you
Mm.
can get like a 1 month intro for free. And then, well, I mean, YouTube, I had my 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 son has to go to this mandatory training, like 2 weeks working in a company. And because he didn't have any other work, then he joined me. And we traveled for 2 weeks on my normal. I was teaching a class in Austria, and
Okay.
then we traveled to Sweden and did a course there. And as he's kind of during when I'm teaching and I don't have anything for him to do, I wanted him to use that time to do exactly what I would tell basically everyone on this call. So what I did for him was that I
Mhm.
took some courses from Pluralsight and LinkedIn, as I have those. And those are good when you want to know how the industry works. But then when I wanted him also, he's 16, and I
Okay.
wanted him also to understand more about like how CPUs work, how memory works, how storage works. And he's still, because they miss all that nowadays. They
Yeah.
work on this application level. They just see an app running on a phone and they have no idea what happens behind the scenes. So for general like how computers work stuff, I actually find YouTube having more of those
Mhm.
resources. And then when it comes to actually you kind of maybe deciding on what you would like to do in cybersecurity, then that's
Right.
more for LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, and those paid services. And then if you want to prove yourself to someone else, it's always worthy having a certificate to show it. I have no other education than high school, and
Wow,
but I
I did not know that. This is
no
awesome. I
high
mean,
school.
yeah.
And my
Wow.
dad made me go through MCSE plus internet certification. My dad made me go do it, and I was like, "Are you seriously that I will need this for anything?" And it ended up being my whole career. So I'm
Awesome.
pro bono for certification.
That's a perfect example. So those who are watching, guys, I do not know. I have a live example, but here you go, who has a good career in the security, and so far you have learned his like how he's been gone through his journey, and not only that, how he's been coaching his son. So the one thing I liked about it that people who are watching, the fundamental, the basics remain the same. You still have to understand the CPU and the memory and all the core operating system, and those stuff you can find on YouTube, as you mentioned, Pluralsight, LinkedIn. Also, if you have some bucks, and you can buy some syllabus. CompTIA A plus has a very basic
Absolutely. Yeah.
for somebody to start with. And then if you go the advanced level, then you can learn about Network Plus and Security Plus. So what timeline we're talking about? A year is good, a 2 year ballpark for somebody. And because everybody who wants to start, then of course the next thing is, okay, how am I gonna get the job, the internship and all that?
I currently, I would say we're really looking at a year. It depends heavily on the individual, but I would say closer to a year.
Okay.
I recruited, like, I mean, everyone is so much concentrating on this old, you have to have this school degree to do anything
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I had some trouble in convincing one of my customers that the best recruit that we had, when we asked him, "What did you study?" His only answer was, "I studied Pluralsight." But
Okay.
the customer was just like, "No, but what's your degree on?" I just studied that. But we have very talented young people coming into the industry. They can learn at a fast pace from wherever they are with very, very targeted training for a certain kind of a position. So to get yourself into the business side, like if you want to be
Right.
an analyst on a SOC, a security operations center analyst on like they usually have many levels. So if you want to start
Right.
at the first level, for example, I would say that is closer to a year. For you to
Hmm.
understand how operating systems work, then
Right.
that'll take a little bit more time because that's just honestly something that you have to kind of draw it out and think about it. And I mean, I've read the internals book, for example, myself. I read it. I remember I was doing a course material about it. Like I run a Windows internals course for 4 days, and
Hmm.
to make a 4-day boot camp version of 1,400 pages of highly technical stuff. It took me quite a long time to get it, and I drew pictures and I made slides and I
Wow.
tried to make it into an understandable form. So it takes a little bit more time. But I mean, that's
Yep.
the same when you go to a SOC. And I
Yeah.
followed these guys around. If you go to a SOC and you see a first level person on the SOC and they see a threat. Most often what happens is that they see a threat that, for example, says that we have some suspicious activity in svc host.exe happening on
Okay.
Windows. And then they have to call the next level because the next level understands what's on that screen. The first level really first needs to kind of more operate the tools. They
Okay.
need to understand how the process works. They need to know what is done when you have an incident. How do you report this? Where do you log it? How do you preserve evidence? They need to more know how the process works. And then
Right.
when it becomes difficult, then that case is forwarded to the second level or the third level. The third level guys are the guys who understand then that, the second level usually understands that this SVC hosted, it looks fishy because it's not signed. It
Hmm.
is Windows is normal executable, but that must not be Microsoft's because it's not digitally signed. So they know a little bit more about the content.
Right.
And then when you get that very few, very, very difficult cases, then you will escalate those up to the third level. And those guys are many times people who have worked with operating systems for 2 decades. So it's a continuing journey, but it's also a very rewarding journey
Yeah.
because you can always get better and you can get a better position. Like one thing that I would really like everyone to understand is that cybersecurity is, of course, a very, very critical thing for us to get more people in. We really need people, but people should also understand that if you're seeking a career, it's really good to be listening to these podcasts, for example, because there's 6 jobs on the blue team side for every job on the red team side. But the red team side is always the very sexy one. It
Yeah.
sounds cool to people because someone actually pays you to try to hack into a bank.
Yeah.
What for a young person that might sound very tempting, like wow, now I can do what I actually wanted to do as a hobby, I can get paid for it. But there's 6 jobs because the red team person needs to succeed in one thing and he's done his job. Blue team needs to be able to protect against every kind of attack there is.
Yeah.
So there's 6 jobs on the blue team side for every 1 job on the red team side. So honestly, I would like just it takes I know this because it takes a little bit of time. When I was younger, I was
Yeah.
also more keen into hacking into things.
Right.
Now that I have kids, I'm more into keeping my own nest clean. It's also a little bit like it's changed in my head as well. But that's
Right.
something that just remember if you want to get a job and you want to secure a job, it's 6 times easier to get that job on the good side.
Exactly. Exactly. Because that's the impression I get when people are talk about cybersecurity is hacking. And on the other side, where you have to have all these, and this is where the growth is basically, in my opinion. On the blue team, you have lot more growth. There is a transition period. So it's not necessary, but somebody to get started, as you just mentioned, SOC level one, front line, just to watch the dashboard and monitoring, just learn those basic skills that you just mentioned, basic fundamentals. Who knows, within, if you're good enough, you spend more hours every day or every weekend, within 6 months you will be ready for that very first level of job where you can understand the dashboard and all those things you mentioned about SOC. So are there any tools specifically you think you want to mention, or?
Well, of course, I mean, it depends totally on what you're looking for. As I'm a Microsoft person,
Yep.
I really love the Microsoft stack on this. So anything related to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint,
Okay.
that means, well, of course, it's good to understand, like, it's good to understand Sentinel, for example, but that's more about like storing logs from my perspective. If you ask me, there are these old style socks, and
Okay.
those are CM based socks. I say
Yes, they are.
SIEM, CM,
Seam.
they
Yeah,
are
seam. Yep.
SIEM, yeah.
Yep.
So SIEM socks are the old way of doing this. That's where
All
you would
right.
forward a gazillion log entries somewhere, and then someone would try to analyze those log entries and do something about it. I don't believe in that at all. I mean, there's a reason for someone for compliance reasons to keep your records for 2 years. Then that's fine. But I mean,
Okay.
from protecting yourself from the imminent threat, which is ransomware currently mostly, that's where you need to concentrate on EDR or XDR. So endpoint
Exactly.
level protections. So Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, it doesn't only see what happens, but it can actually also mitigate those threats. And
Yeah.
many people ask me what my job currently is. And I'm a security architect for many, many different companies. And when people ask me what I do, I used to tell them that I will teach you concepts that will keep you from being breached. But it's been a little bit a journey for me as well to go and understand that what I nowadays answer if I get that question is my job. There is 2 hours average of a first entry into a company to gaining full domain or full global admin access.
Okay.
That's 2 hours on average. To be fair, on average, they use 180 days before they do anything. They lurk in the network for half a year. But the average of being able to take down the company is 2 hours. And I always nowadays say that my job is to try to extend that 2 hours as much as I can so that the
Got it.
security operations center has time to catch them. So my
Exactly.
mentality has to change myself. I used to be a guy who keeps people out, but now
Yeah.
I'm slowing their travel
Yep.
so that someone can capture them. And that's more of these zero trust principles of assume breach. I mean,
Yeah.
now we live by the assumption that someone will breach us. Our job is to make it as slow as possible so that we
Exactly.
can catch them before they do anything bad.
And this is perfect. So those who are watching it, this is the one of the best piece of advice because there is nothing 100% secure. So you're gonna make sure you have layer defense in depth by applying so many tools, a different layer of protection. And also, I wanted to add on Azure Sentinel a little bit. This is more of an advanced, and I put together more than an hour of lecture or 90 minutes combined lecture. And this is for experienced people. So, what they have improved, I don't know how much because every day, Cisco, Palo, Microsoft, even Google and AWS, they have their native tools. So, with Sentinel, what I've seen also, they've improved a lot on AI and ML.
Mm.
And 3 years ago, when they were in preview, I was the first very few one who was into the preview and deployed those. And there was false positive, that's for sure, with every product. However, the thing I like, couple of things, is they have data connectors. So if I need to ingest the log from 365, man, it's just 2 minutes. I have to set it up, ingest the log. 24 hours later, I have all the logs in the scene. And this is where they have alert fatigue and all that, their AI and ML. So they look at the correlated events and then they appear on the dashboard. So if you have Sentinel or any SIEM, again, we're talking about Windows. So I would say just go set it up. 90 days, you get log ingestion, I believe, for free. So if you set up with 365 and then you have Azure Active Directory, you have identity and access management, those connectors are there. And not only that, you can even bring the logs from Palos and Carbon
Mm.
Black or other different endpoints. So now since we are talking about cloud, right? So let's change a little bit on the cloud native tools. I mean, if you want to add, you mentioned Defender, something along those lines. What do you see? What's your experience?
Well, yeah, I would say that the single pane for operations, mostly for Microsoft, is really through the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint toolkit. If we're talking about Microsoft technologies, then one thing that is super important nowadays is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, where we can actually, which is very vital for companies to be able to have different policies for access to these cloud native applications, whatever they are. Conditional access is a core functionality that everyone has to learn and learn how to operate it and how the whole thing itself works. Conditional
So
access relates to everything.
two things you mentioned: conditional access, and maybe you want to touch base a little bit identity.
Privileged identity management in general. So PIM, whether it's Microsoft or not, we're done with the days of everyone being an admin or not. We've gone into just enough access, just in time, meaning that you will request for being a administrator of something and you're time bombed of not staying such forever. So it's just a role that gets added to you through PIM. Another tool with this is full of PIM, PAM, PAM, but PIM, then we have PAM, which is privileged access management. If
Management.
you
Yep.
if you want to have a good toolkit to also learn, it would actually be the new just published Intune Suite. The Intune Suite contains Microsoft's first ever privileged access management, which relates to the fact that we can actually control processes and their admin rights instead of always controlling a user or a computer of being an admin. So
Okay.
that's the first one for Microsoft. That's being filled with tools like Beyond Trust, Policy Pack, Admin by Request, Ivanti. There's,
I
there's
see.
different providers that did PAM because we say that we've been in this different kinds of epochs. We've been in this time where everyone was an admin and could run whatever they want. And we're kind of like currently we're in a place where most people are understanding that you should not be an admin all the time, but we still allow any kind of applications to run. And we're moving towards this app control epoch where we actually no one's an admin unless needed and only for a
Mhm.
specified time. And also that we allow list binaries that we are going to run. We have more than 1 million pieces of malware found per day. out of
Wow.
which 96% only appear once.
Right.
So there's no way of doing this with the traditional like anti-malware stuff,
Yeah,
which means that we
exactly.
are going from listing 1 million bad things per day into listing your 100 good applications that you use, and then we secure them with cloud native stuff. But I would say like Windows Defender for cloud apps, that's something that's it's a very big and good thing to learn. Intune Suite has a lot of different tools in it,
Okay.
but the privileged access management was just announced, and it's currently free for testing. So it's a
Okay.
good time to learn it. Microsoft is a great example of this. Microsoft in their Redmond domain, which is the on-prem domain, they had 140,000 local admins. So
Wow.
they were telling everyone that you can't be an admin, but they themselves only in the new cloud only connected kind of employee force that they have, they are now actually limited to being just limited users instead of admins. So now Microsoft started to understand the industry
Mhm.
with their problems of not having enough rights to install a printer at home or stuff like that. So now they finally had the motivation to build a toolkit for this. So this privileged access management, now even Microsoft being a player in it, it's a really big thing. Allow listing is a really big thing in general,
Okay.
whether that's Carbon Black, Beyond Trust, App Locker.
Okay.
App Locker was just changed heavily because App Locker is now available for professional versions, as it was an enterprise feature only when it's managed
Okay.
through group policy. And then I see these as waves. I have been consulting the same customers first for the first decade for getting rid of their admin rights. Then they came back, and then there was the second wave where we deployed AppLocker or some kind of an allow listing for them, Windows Defender Application Control, whatever, some sort of an allow listing solution to control the binary. And then now, currently, the biggest hype is about privileged access workstations.
Yep. Okay.
That's currently the biggest thing. And I mean, there's no really easier way to secure your environment than keeping admin rights away from access to malware. So
Hmm.
security is easy at the end of the day. You just make sure that
Right.
devices that can take down your environment can't talk to
Well.
Facebook, and
Mm-mm.
people who have enough rights to take down your environment can't log on to devices that can access Facebook. So we basically
Okay.
simple concepts. We keep excessive privileges away from threats.
Yeah.
Just sandbox them out of each other. And
Yep.
that's where privileged access workstations, privileged identity management, privileged access management, all these cool 3-letter acronyms, PAWS,
Well.
PAM, PIM.
So you mentioned a good example. So what I'm hearing is that okay, native root cloud security, a lot of development, there are challenges, but for somebody who wants to start, if it's a Microsoft shop and all that, first look at those. What are there? What are the on the roadmap? So two questions I have. Like one is any advice for the businesses, or do you want to spend 2 minutes on maybe ransomware? And then the next question, what's in a day life of a cybersecurity expert? So
So first of all, what I will nowadays start every conversation that I get into with a new customer, when we have really cool concepts that we should deploy, I first want to make sure that we don't get hacked while we're deploying these concepts. And I want everyone to be able to sleep well. First thing you need to
yep.
do to be able to sleep well with your company is you separate your cloud or domain access from your backups. And if you're using hypervisors for anything, just separate these 3 layers from each other. If you're in a situation where you have a global admin or a domain admin, with that account wipe out your backups. Very bad place. You have to make sure that you yourself, as an admin of your environment, cannot destroy your backups. So there's only 2 options: Azure or Amazon or Google all offer immutable backups. Immutable
Okay.
backups are backups. They have a certain lifespan that no one can delete them. So we can say that we have an immutable backup for 14 days. Then even the company cannot delete it. It's of
Nice.
course
Okay.
it's a little bit of an investment because that means that in the next 14 days I also can't give up on my backups because it's
But,
completely
but
out of reach.
But it's all about the risk, right? You got to spend the money. It's your
Yes,
business risk. So you have to evaluate your business risk. Yep.
of,
Right.
of offline backups can be achieved with tapes or USB
Yeah.
discs
But you
or
don't want to
whatever. I
do
mean
that.
that yes,
So,
exactly. So that's we've done that before. Now we will do the same concept. The tools have just changed a little bit. So first you have to make those background checks. So if
Right.
you're if you're also a hybrid environment, which means that you're also running stuff on VMware or Hyper-V, make sure that your domain admins cannot manage your fabric. So your domain admins cannot wipe out your VMware or Hyper-V. Your domain admins can't wipe out your backups. So the same concepts for both on-prem and cloud. In that sense, we can just in the cloud, it's a little bit easier because we don't have to invest in this physical hardware to do all this.
Right.
It's configuration, it's code that we put in. No, we don't even have to code anything. It's of course no code, but I mean, it's a little bit different things done. I mean, same things done in a little bit different way. So that's the
Perfect.
first thing. And that kind of allows us to sleep well, because if we start to implement something bigger, we don't want to get breached while we're doing it. So I
Right.
always have to start with that. And then after that, from ransomware's perspective, they want admin rights. Don't give it to them. Don't
Right.
have access to weapons. If you have local admin rights on your machine, you have access to weapons. We all know weapons don't kill people, bullets do. But honestly,
Yeah.
if you take a bullet and try to throw it at some people, it probably doesn't hurt that much. I mean,
Right.
honestly, you control the guns in Windows by removing admin rights, and that's what
Makes sense.
they want. Last year, 55% of all vulnerabilities were done to gain privileged access. They want privileged access. Don't give them privileged access. That's the first thing. Then when you get rid of your admin rights, then it's time to start controlling your binaries, whatever kind of allow listing solution you have in place. Trust me, it's nice to add one good application per month rather than trying to add 1 million bad applications per day. And one
Right.
thing, privileged access workstation, don't manage your environment from the same device where you go Facebook. That is the
Mm.
simplest thing you can do, and you can take down your attack surface by 95%. Take patching very seriously. I try to tell people patch more, test less. I know it's really hard to convince your boss about this, but
Mhm.
honestly, when your server goes down for 1 hour because you installed a bad patch, they should actually be sleeping better, because that will probably prevent you from being down for a month. So
Well,
vulnerabilities last year and the year before, vulnerabilities were, for the first time in history, phishing was not number one attack vector for ransomware. So this was vulnerability. So concentrate on patching.
but those are the very good recommendations. So pretty much you explain like life in a day of a cybersecurity. Something you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. My life is, of course, a little bit different because I'm more the teacher and the architect who just tries to teach other people to go and deploy good stuff all around the world. I think my responsibility is really big, but my day is probably a little bit different than anyone else's. So, but
Right.
if talking about a cybersecurity person, it's keeping yourself up to date. Yes, learn
So
all the time. You're not just getting a master's one time. You're now continuously educating yourself.
I really appreciate Sami. So thankful to you. You took out this time, educated myself and the people who are going to watch this podcast. And hopefully in the future, we'll have some more specific discussion if you have time and depending on that. And Sami is also, I put his details at MVP. He's very known. He's been published his name a lot of time in Finland and is very known to Microsoft communities. Do check it out, Google it. I'll put all his information in the description below this video. And I really appreciate people like him who get on the call, share their knowledge. I really appreciate it, Sami.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.